listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I am Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach, and I specialize in helping people who are cheating on their partners or engaging in something they think counts as infidelity, deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. I offer confidential, non-judgmental coaching that is tailored to your specific needs. So if you want some help dealing with your infidelity situation, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. All right. Today we are going to talk about a new relationship energy, which is roughly synonymous with limerence, which is roughly synonymous with the so-called honeymoon period of a relationship. We've talked about these concepts and these experiences in passing on this podcast, and I want to give them a little more attention today. I've had quite a few clients and podcast listeners tell me something along the lines of, well, I've been having an affair and I really love my affair partner, and I think there's a chance things could work out with us. But I've been listening to your podcast and I've heard what you and your guests have said about limerence and new relationship energy. And I know that those things are bad. And I'm pretty sure my relationship isn't solely based on those kinds of experiences. I want to make something absolutely clear. My perspective is that it's very important to be aware of what new relationship energy and limerence are. It's important to be aware that the experience of meeting someone new who we really like and connect with can be absolutely intoxicating. And not only because our brains are flooded with pleasurable chemicals when we're in the throes of lust or love or romance or some combination thereof. It is important to be aware that the experience of new relationship energy is not necessarily an indicator of a relationship's long-term potential. And it is important to be aware that expecting the particular form of excitement that so often characterizes new relationships to last forever is perhaps not realistic. However, it is also important to recognize that new relationship energy is a really beautiful thing in its own right. It's an amazing thing. And yes, it may be a temporary high of sorts if we want to put it in those terms, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to enjoy that high. The experience of new relationship energy or limerence is, for many people, a highly pleasurable experience for so many reasons. And these reasons don't have to be bad or problematic. The problems, perhaps, are that some of us seek out this sort of pleasure obsessively or misinterpret what to do with this pleasure. And some of us distrust this kind of pleasure completely, or perhaps are more wary of it than we need to be. But let me back up and provide a few definitions. Limerence is partially, and I emphasize partially, defined as an obsessive mental state of romantic infatuation. And I want to suggest that this does not have to be a bad thing. It can be, of course. Some of us do seek out the excitement and obsessive energy of new romantic connections to a degree that has a detrimental impact on our lives. And sometimes we become so obsessed with a particular person that we start to engage in behavior that that person is not okay with. And that can be problematic. And all of that is important to take seriously. But that stuff is another conversation for another time. For today's purposes, what I want to suggest is that a little bit of obsessive romantic infatuation can be awesome. Being insanely excited about someone and thinking about them all the time and wanting to be together all the time, or at least as often as possible, can be fantastic, right? New relationship energy is sometimes defined as the state of mind experienced at the beginning of a sexual or romantic or sexual and romantic relationship, typically involving heightened emotional and sexual feelings and excitement. This term has gained a lot of traction in the polyamory world. And the polyamory folks emphasize that when we're engaged in multiple romantic connections, it's important to recognize that new romantic connections may have a very different quality than more established romantic connections. And that if we're trying to balance multiple romantic relationships, we may want to be aware that getting super excited about someone new may have an impact on longer-term, more established relationships that could be detrimental. Or in other words, make new friends, but keep the old. And be nice to the old when you're getting really excited about the new ones. But the polyamory folks also emphasize, and quite rightly in my opinion, that new relationship energy can be an essential ingredient in forming long-term bonds. Another thing the polyamory folks emphasize, which I think is really important, is that great things can lie beyond new relationship energy within any particular relationship. New relationship energy may be a high of sorts, a dramatic high even, but it can also transition into other forms of pleasurable connection with your person. It doesn't mean that when the high wears off, there's nothing left necessarily. And furthermore, forging a positive long-term relationship with someone may not happen without experiencing new relationship energy first. Put a little bit differently, I would say that intimate dealings with other humans over a sustained period of time can be crazy business. Why on earth would we ever bother to hitch our wagon to someone and commit to sticking it out with them for better or for worse or for whatever it is if we weren't at one point completely and totally besotted by them? We may need a little mad infatuation to balance out the other flavors of madness that can come along with romantic partnerships. So if long-term partnership is what you want, an exciting new connection may be a very logical and generative beginning point. Of course, I have to say that this is a very socially and historically specific statement. In other times and places, romantic love has been, and sometimes still is, considered a very impractical basis for the formation of stable long-term partnerships. And we talked about this on this podcast. Dr. Devin Smith and I did an episode called Historical Perspectives on Marriage with Devin Smith, one of the earliest episodes of this podcast. And we talked about the historical origins of romantic love and how romantic love used to be considered dangerous and problematic. And all of that is interesting and important in a sense. But for today's purposes, I'm going to put all of that stuff aside because in much of the Western world today and elsewhere, for that matter, romantic love is considered a good thing. It's considered a desirable thing, and it's considered a reasonable basis for forming long-term partnerships. So that's the context most of us are operating within right now. And if we are operating under this context, within this context, if we are operating under the premise that romance and desire and excitement are important ingredients of romantic partnerships, I think it's important to look at new relationship energy or limerence or the exciting early stages of a relationship with equanimity. We don't need to consider these phases of a relationship categorically bad or categorically suspect, or consider them a short-term high that's bound to wear off. There may be great value, in fact, in leaning into new relationship energy and enjoying it and seeing where it takes you. And I think it is also important to be aware that being in the phase of new relationship energy can be completely intoxicating. And there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that. In fact, it can be very instructive to find yourself intoxicated by love. For instance, if you've been in an unsatisfying relationship for many years, and then you find yourself deliriously in love or in lust with someone new, you may awaken to the possibility that so much more joy and connection and delight is available to you And that recognition may be very important, even if you do not ultimately continue the relationship that is occasioning that excitement for you in the moment. However, it's also important to be aware that sometimes we meet someone and at first things are amazing and great, and then the new relationship energy fades away. And once the initial excitement wears off, it turns out there isn't all that much there. The connection may have seemed incredible for a while, and then you wake up one morning and all of a sudden the magic is gone and you can't quite figure out what you ever saw in your person. This does happen. And I think it's important to be aware that this can happen without assuming that it necessarily will happen. This is important for all new relationships, and it can be especially important to keep in mind if your new relationship is an affair or otherwise involves someone cheating on someone they're committed to. When we throw infidelity and the things that often come with it, like secrets and danger and excitement and deception and sneaking around into the mix, the experience of new relationship energy can be heightened. The new relationship may be especially exciting and perhaps especially anxiety-inducing, but that may be exciting too. And the stakes of the whole business may seem really high, and the emotions involved may be extra intense. Or maybe not. Every relationship is different. Every affair is different. This is just a possibility for you to be aware of. It's not necessarily an assessment of your specific situation. But I point this out because it can be really hard to figure out what's going on, whether what's going on within the so-called affair bubble is quote unquote real, or if a relationship has a chance of being viable beyond the affair bubble. And what I mean by affair bubble is this. If you're having an affair, you probably aren't living out your everyday life with your affair partner. Your relationship probably exists within limits. You probably don't live in the same home day in and day out. You probably don't do household chores together or manage shared finances or deal with the routine business of everyday life. You may not get to see each other as often as you'd like. And so the demand for your time together may exceed the supply. And this may inspire you to regard your time together in a certain way. More specifically, you may really cherish the time you have with your affair partner. You may be super focused and present when you are with them. You may engage with them as if they are the most important thing in your life when you are together. And, although these are certainly things you could continue to do outside of the affair bubble, the point for now is that it's quite possible that the very fact that your relationship is subject to so many constraints is part of what makes it exciting. Being in the affair bubble with someone you're really into may amplify the intoxication of limerence or new relationship energy to a point where it seems very hard to figure out whether your relationship is an incredibly exciting experience that is only viable in a vacuum, or if you found something you want to pursue under so-called normal circumstances. That does not mean it's impossible to make sense of your new relationship or your affair bubble relationship. Being deliriously happy need not prevent us from making thoughtful decisions. And in fact, one thing I see people doing fairly often is questioning their happiness in a relationship and minimizing the joy they're experiencing in their relationship because it is an affair or involves somebody being unfaithful to someone else. In a way, this tendency makes some sense. Many of us have gotten the message that cheating is bad, and therefore relationships that involve cheating are bad too. And therefore, whatever we feel within the context of the forbidden relationship must be questionable and potentially not valid or not sustainable. And this is where I think we need to make room for a lot more nuance. Looking at any aspect of life from a strictly dualistic perspective, where something is either good or bad or right or wrong, doesn't leave us too many options. And so much of life exists outside of the polar opposites. So much of life exists within shades of gray. Cheating happens for all sorts of reasons, and relationships that involve infidelity aren't necessarily bad in general or in particular. The impulse to do the quote unquote right thing may be well founded, but the problem is that sometimes life gets complicated and stark distinctions between right and wrong or good and bad don't really help us make things any less complicated. When we try to force an experience into the quote right box or the wrong box, we usually end up creating a lot of consternation for ourselves that actually makes things a lot harder for us than they need to be. Put more specifically, when we're working with only two categories, good or bad or right or wrong, it's really hard to allow ourselves to feel whatever we feel, be honest with ourselves about what we want, and make decisions about what we're going to do that are truly right for us, that don't end up causing us more confusion and consternation later on down the line. This is one reason why it's so important to look at infidelity in neutral terms. Sometimes amazing relationships start off as affairs. And getting to the point where everyone's business is taken care of and the affair can transition into a so-called normal relationship may be quite a process, and it may be a challenging and disruptive process. But looking at that sort of situation in stark terms of either good or bad won't make those challenges easier for anyone involved. And this kind of dualistic perspective may obscure the fact that it may be worth going through the challenges and disruptions in order to experience the happiness that you feel with a particular person and to live out the life that you want to live with them. If we think that disruption is categorically bad, we may discount any happiness that we may think could lead to life disruptions. Sometimes we're so distrustful of happiness that we believe pursuing it can't possibly pay off. And here's the thing, we all have the choice of what forms of happiness we pursue or don't pursue. We all have the choice of asking of how much happiness we want to pursue. But here's the thing, you might want to ask yourself how good you can stand it. We have to decide how much happiness we're willing to allow into our lives. And we have to ask ourselves what we're willing to do to create it and sustain it. And I think it's really important to ask ourselves that question, how good can I stand it? In very general and in very specific senses. How good can you allow your life as a whole to be? How good can you allow your relationship or relationships to be? Yes, we have to do things in order to generate happiness. Our mindset matters and our actions matter. But I'd like to suggest that it all starts with the extent to which we believe it's okay for us to be happy and the extent to which we believe happiness is available to us. To apply all of this to new relationship energy or limerence or the honeymoon period or whatever you want to call the exciting early phase of a new relationship, I want to suggest that the early phase of a relationship may be special in its own way, but that doesn't mean it has to be the only special phase of a relationship. You can use new relationship energy as a template for the future of your relationship. You can allow it to inform the later stages of your relationship. And you can do this with intention. You can do this on purpose. How do you want to feel in your relationship for the long haul? You get to make that decision and you get to create those feelings on purpose. And if you don't know how to do that, you can learn. And this is one of the things I teach my clients how to do. Collectively, we have all of these ideas that love or attraction or desire are mysterious forces beyond our control, but that's not quite how it works. We often create these kinds of feelings unintentionally, and those experiences can be really nice. But we can also learn how to intentionally create and sustain desire and passion and love and intimacy and all of that good stuff. I also want to point out that we can't know for sure how a relationship will turn out unless we pursue it and see where it goes. Sometimes we get very concerned about trying to predict the future of a relationship. But when we do this, we usually just end up chasing our own tail. We're much better off learning how to contribute to the creation of our future in all of the ways we can control. and learning how to relate differently to the things we can't foresee or control. Also, sometimes a good thing is just a good thing. Sometimes an amazing initial connection is an indication of more good things to come. And sometimes it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So to wrap up here, I want to reiterate that I don't think new relationship energy needs to be regarded as categorically suspect. As always, the devil is in the details, or God is in the details if you prefer. And the question is always, how do we as individuals relate to our unique experiences of new relationship energy? What do we make of it? What do we make it mean? How do we make decisions when we're in a state of new relationship energy? And how do we use new relationship energy as fuel for an ongoing terrific relationship if we want to do that? Also, I do want to reiterate that some of us do chase new relationship energy as a means of feeling good. And if we have a pattern of doing that, and if that has an impact on our life that we don't like, it's worth taking a look at what's going on and possibly making some adjustments. But just because new relationship energy feels good doesn't mean it's bad. When I work with people who are having an affair or are otherwise engaging in infidelity, and they're trying to figure out their feelings for their affair partner and decide whether or not they're a fleeting infatuation or something much more serious, I hope these folks examine the specifics of their unique situation. I help my clients sort through their feelings and get clear about what they want. And this is always a very individually specific process. And I can help you do this too. There's no one size fits all way of dealing with complex relationship dynamics. And I can help you look at your situation from a new perspective so that you can get clear on what's truly right for you. If you'd like my help in doing this, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed what you've heard, I hope you'll head on over to iTunes to rate and review the show. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.